Just a quick rundown of how this goes. For each of the capstones, the brilliant student will present for 20, 25 minutes or so, and then there is an opportunity for you, for anyone, any of the audience members, to ask questions about their process, about what they learned, about what might come next, or about the topic itself. So without further ado...
Well, to slightly amend that for mine, I would love for you to ask questions during about what I'm talking about. If you have questions about the process or what I've learned, save those questions for the end. I'm going to save more time, but I'll probably talk for about 25 to 30 minutes, and so there'll be about 10 minutes for questions at the end. Brett, could you let me know when I'm at the 25-minute mark? Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. So before I get started, I wanted to cover a few definitions because I'm talking about neuroscience and developmental psychopathology. So what is that even? So first of all, the brain is an organ that controls thought, memory, senses, breathing, hunger, etc., etc. And what about the mind? People often say, oh, my mind. What is it? It's not just the organ of the brain, but also how your brain, the connections your brain makes with your body senses and the people in the world around you. So the definition here is mind is a relational and embodied process that regulates the flow of energy and information. Neuroscience is the study of how the brain supports those mental processes. And then developmental psychopathology is the study of the impact of adverse experiences on the development of the mind and brain. So if the mind is embodied and relational, how does that work? All the sensory input, which is not just the traditional 5 senses, but also our body sense of our internal organs and the processes of how those work, also like our body position, all of that combines and gets carried up the brainstem into the brain. So we see how we have nerves throughout our whole body, and the spinal cord is kind of like the highway. I like to think of nerves and neurons as mailmen sending messages throughout the brain. And so the spinal cord is like the highway where they go really, really fast. So the brainstem is the very top of the spinal cord, and it mostly transfers information up and down, but it also controls automatic reflexes, like if I pulled my hand back from a hot stove. And it can also help monitor heartbeat and other automatic processes like that. At the top of the brainstem, there's a cerebellum. That's the round part we see there. And that controls balance and movement. Then we get to the main part, the big part here, and that's the cerebrum. And there's a lot going on here. As you can see, so the outer part is kind of squiggly, weird, what we think of when we think of a brain. And that part is called the cortex. But there's a lot of parts underneath it I call them the downstairs parts. And I have those brightly colored here. So a few weeks ago, I gave a talk to a group of kids, because one of the things I've loved the most is talking to everyone about what I've been learning, and including my little siblings. So I'll just exit the slideshow quickly so that I can show a clip of that video. And hopefully the volume is up the whole way. Now, there's a lot of different parts of the brain, and each of the parts in this picture. The outside looks kind of squiggly and weird. Some of you are calling me pictures, okay? And this part on the outside, I like to call the upstairs part of the brain. And then there's other parts underneath, the downstairs part. And some of them have kind of weird or confusing names. I made up different characters to help me remember. So first, we have Grandpa Hippo. I know this is an elephant, not a hippo. Just bear with me. He's rather old. He's lived a long time. His full name is Hippocampus lupus. He's one of the downstairs people. And he sits in his library all day reading books. And it has so many books. The walls are just covered in books. And every day he gets more books. And he organizes the books at night when everyone else is not call him an owl. I did. Yes. Okay. Well, he has lots of books, and while I contemplate the meaning of
stay here, no fighting, okay? So he's like organized these books. Now sometimes these books get ripped, or people write notes in the margins, so they're not in perfect condition. These books are what he calls memories. So he organizes our memories in our brain. Now he has a granddaughter, and her name is Amy. Now she's very curious about the world. She wants to observe everything around her and see all the things that are going on in the world outside. But sometimes she's very scared. And then she makes a loud noise. Ring, 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 ring. Let everyone know there's something dangerous happening. And then everyone in the house knows, oh no, something dangerous is happening. So then they can help get the person to safety. And so she's very curious and she's trying to help us stay safe. But sometimes she reacts very violently, but it seems like a very small circumstance. Yes, Margot? Is that movie a amygdala? It is. Yes.
There we go. So I only had time to talk about a few of the parts of the brain, sadly. And so I talked about the hippocampus, which I named Grandpa Hippo, and the amygdala, little Amy. There's also thalamus and hypothalamus. Thalamus, so I imagine them all living in a house together. These parts all live on the downstairs. So thalamus and hypothalamus, their bedroom is right next to the front door of the house. They take a lot of naps. I don't know, they're just extra tired people. But because their bedroom is right next to the front door, they hear all of the information that comes from outside, coming from the brainstem. And so then they can go and tell the other people in the house what's going on. So thalamus is the one who regulates all of the sensory input that we get from coming up the brainstem. And then hypothalamus takes that sensory input and goes and tells the pituitary gland, their son Pit, what to do in response to this. And so Pit is in charge of sending hormones throughout the brain. And then the purple part, we can see, that's the corpus callosum. Because our brain has two hemispheres, a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. I imagine right brain as an 8-year-old girl who has very curly hair, pink splattered dress. She is very curious about everything and knows what she wants, like most kids do, and she wants it now. Instant gratification. She's also very observant of body language. On the other hand, left brain is a 40-year-old man with a very dry British sense of humor. He's not as close with the people downstairs, so he takes time to think about the structure and order and logic of things. The two of them aren't great at communicating with each other, so then there's Cal, the corpus callosum, who's a teenage boy and runs back and forth between the two of them sending messages. But then upstairs we have the cortex family. There's the mom, prefrontal cortex. She's very empathetic and self-aware and considers everyone's perspective before making decisions. She has 4 kids. Frontal cortex, she's the planner of the house. She makes sure everything is very planned out. And then parietal cortex, he's a busybody and won't stop moving, he's just always moving. And then we have occipital cortex, who watches everything, vision. And temporal cortex, he's a good listener and picks up languages super easily. He also is in charge of auditory processing. Now, we tend to think of emotion and reason as being very different things. Don't cry, pay attention, why are you being so emotional? Now, emotion literally means outmove, or the reason for movement, the reason we do anything. And it's all, everything we do, everything we think, everything we feel, it's all connected. And we can't separate these things. We actually have brain cells in our heart and in our gut. And they communicate with each other, the brain cells in our mind and in our heart and in our gut. And most of the time we won't feel something as truly real unless our body feels it. So I know I'm angry, my hands are clenched, my stomach is clenched, my face is red, I'm like, Or I know I'm anxious when my heart is pounding and my stomach feels sick and I feel like I'm about to throw up even though I'm not sick or anything. Well, this connection is called the vagal complex, and it plays an important role in many things, some of which we'll get to later. Before we get to that though, I want to talk a bit about memory. In the video I talked about how Grandpa Hippo, the hippocampus, organizes memories. So what are these memories and where do they get stored? There's two main types of memories. Can anyone tell me where you were the first time you learned how to ride a bike? Right?
I was in the wheel mill. I was about 2 years old.
Okay, so that's an explicit memory. You remember this moment, you remember where you were, what you were doing, and when you think about it, you know that this happened in the past. You have this timeline of when it happened, where it happened. If I get on a bike though, I'm probably not going to think about the very first time I learned how to ride on a bike. I'm just going to get on and go. I'm not thinking about, okay, so this is how I did it the first time, so this is how I need to do it now. It's just muscle memory. And that's called implicit memory. The senses, the muscles were tight, I need to move in this way, this is what I was smelling, this is what I was feeling. And those don't have a conscious recall feeling the way that explicit memories do. When I knit, I'm not thinking about the mechanics of how it works, what my hands are doing, I'm just doing it. So these explicit memories that we have, riding a bike, are combined into a narrative. First I woke up, I got dressed, I ate breakfast, etc. And then the implicit memories are combined into that narrative to make up our autobiographical memory. When a person thinks about a very emotional event or moment, they actually re-experience how they felt in that moment, even if it's been a long time. But if those memories are integrated into our autobiographical memory, we can realize, oh, this happened in the past. So maybe I'm starting to feel those feelings again, but I'm not in that place anymore. So for instance, one time I got a call from a youth pastor. He said, I have some bad news. This is going to be my last summer at the youth group. He had gotten a new job. Now at first I was just kind of shocked. It seemed to come out of nowhere. And then once I got over that initial shock, I was really sad and a bit angry. But I was also happy because he couldn't keep the excitement in his voice as he talked about how this new job was going to be perfectly fitting his skills and talents. And when I think about that moment, it still kind of calls up those feelings again, even though it happened a year ago. Now sometimes an event or a series of events or many unrelated events were too much to process. Maybe the person was just focused on trying to survive in that moment. And those memories never got integrated into our narrative and autobiographical memories. Then these implicit memories can come up seemingly out of nowhere and be very terrifying for a person to re-experience. I'm going to show another clip where I'm explaining the adrenaline response.
Now, if I was playing with a toy, and my brother came, and he also wanted to play with it, and he stole the toy. And he stole the toy from me. Well, now, amygdala is saying, oh no, danger, he stole the toy from me, and now I want it back, and he's not giving it back, so he's trying to hurt me. So what am I going to do? So one thing I could do is say, stop, that's not fair, give it back. And I might punch him. I might say, Mommy, they stole the toy from me, they can give it back. I might run up to my room and cry. I'm going to get away from him, he's being mean. Don't my brother is bigger and taller and stronger than you. I think so. There are ones who are bigger and taller and stronger than me. So what if they stole it and he's gonna punch me? And I'm in a corner, so I can't run away. I can't punch back. He's a lot taller and stronger than me. So he's gonna pummel me. So what am I gonna do now? And I say, I'm so sorry. You can play with it. I don't want it after all. It's okay. I didn't know you wanted to play with it. Or am I not really sure what to do? Or sometimes in very extreme circumstances, people get so scared that they might faint and topple over.
quick nervous system, think of automatic functions. Controls many things, breathing, heart rate, digestion. And this has two sides of the same coin, you could say. There's the sympathetic nervous system, which is what we just saw, and the parasympathetic nervous system. So I'm walking in the woods, it's a beautiful day, I'm just strolling along, walking pretty slowly, having a good time. I'm calm, enjoying my walk. My body's digesting the food I had for lunch earlier in the day. When suddenly I see a snake. Ah! My amygdala alerts my body, there's a danger thing. I run away, or at least get a safe distance away from the snake. Now I'm safe, my body returns back to normal. But when I'm in danger mode, I'm going to continue in that state with adrenaline pumping until I feel safe. But sometimes, there's also other hormones that are released. We tend to think of hormones as just something that happens during puberty. Testosterone, estrogen. There's actually lots of hormones that do many different things for our body. One of them is cortisol, the stress hormone. Now, stress can be good in small quantities, shocking, I know. It can help me finish a homework assignment or do something I need to do even if I really don't want to. But in large quantities, when it sticks around for a long time, it can severely damage connections in the brain. So if I'm staying in the sympathetic nervous system, in flight, fright, etc., it's going to start hurting my body, not just my mind, if I stay in that state. So how can we calm down after danger is gone and we're still panicking? One way you can do this is by slowing down our breathing. Breath and heartbeat are one of the few automatic responses that we also can regulate consciously. And so when we breathe in, we're actually preparing for danger. But when we breathe out deeply, we're telling our body, I'm safe now. It's like we're teaching our body, chill out. So would you all breathe with me? Not quite yet, I'll explain. Well, breathe, but. In through your nose for 4 seconds, hold for 7, and then out like through your mouth, like you're blowing through a straw for 8 seconds. If you want, you can put a hand on your heart and a hand on your gut. Remember that vagal complex I was talking about earlier? You can close your eyes if you want. It helps you to focus. You might be able to feel your heartbeat. I want you to notice how your body reacts as you breathe normally. In and out. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How did that feel? Please answer.
Calming.
Made you sleepy? Yeah. Sleepy. Nathan?
It was relaxing, it calmed me down.
Yeah. Yeah, it actively tells our brain and our body to chill out. And so this can be very helpful when we're feeling more stressed or anxious than usual to help us calm down. But there are plenty of times where just breathing isn't going to be enough to help us calm down. So what if I'm in a terrible situation that I have no control over what happens? What if I can't make the danger smaller, flight? Can't make the danger farther away? Well, that's flight. The first one was fight. I can't make myself appear less threatening. Fine. Well, what do I do then? I might end up freezing. There's nothing I can do in a situation. I don't have any control. Now, there's sometimes where freeze ends up being more like fawn, but overall, in a threatening situation, whether or not you feel like you have some sense of control, some sense of agency, is actually more important than you might think. And these situations where someone feels no agency, can be very traumatic. You know, not all trauma is from a situation where someone didn't have any control. Sometimes a person had control or regained control in a terrifying situation, but still has trauma. Sometimes it was one event, sometimes it was many events, sometimes it was several unrelated things. Chronic or repeated trauma is especially common in childhood abuse and domestic violence. Basically, trauma is an experience or series of experiences that a person can't move on from, and it continues to disrupt their life. Whether a person felt some sense of agency or not, whether it was one event or repeated, doesn't make it any more or less valid. As my mentor says, what I'm going through, my trauma, my suffering, it sucks, and I need a lot of love. What you're going through, it sucks, and you need a lot of love. What everyone else is going through, their trauma, their suffering, it sucks, and they need a lot of love. As I mentioned at the beginning, one of the things that I've just loved doing is talking to my siblings about what I've been learning and teaching them how to find more healthy ways to express their emotions, and teaching myself more healthy ways to express my emotions too. And as long as I can remember, I've always taken whatever I'm learning or doing and made up games and stories. The first time we read Lord of the Rings as a family, we fought many battles with the orcs. I was an elf, of course, obviously. And so it seems perfectly natural for me to take this stuff, which we think of like you have to be a psychologist, you have to have a PhD to understand this stuff. No, you don't. My 10-year-old brother has taken this and ran with it. So a few weeks ago, my parents were gone for a couple hours in the evening, and the younger 4 boys, I have 6 brothers, as was mentioned in the video, the younger 4 were playing out in the backyard. I was working on stuff in my room. I heard random screaming noises every now and then, but they were happy screams, so I wasn't worried about it. If they're actually injured, they'll come in and find me. And then there was someone crying, and I'm like, oh great, I should probably go down and check. But I took a minute, because they would just come up to me anyway. And then someone else came up and said, Bethel, so-and-so's hurt. So I was like, okay, I'm coming. So I went outside. 7-year-old was sitting on the deck, clutching his knee and crying, and everyone else was crowded around him, being like, offering varying comfort or unhelpful advice about how he should be fine. So I walk up to him, I roll up his pant leg. He's not bleeding, but there is a bruise starting to form. Does it hurt to move your leg? Can you do that? I said, no, it doesn't hurt. Okay, everyone give us a bit of space. Meanwhile, the 12-year-old, you're fine. Why do you always cry every time you get hurt? You always go screaming to mommy. We never get to finish the games we play, so someone gets hurt, or we have to stop early. Why? Can't you just be okay already? Well, it's perfectly natural to want to go to safety when you're hurt, and going to your mom is a great way to find that safety. So Shechem wasn't in the wrong here. But we were in the middle of playing a game, and I really wanted to finish. And you see, he's fine. Can't we play now? He's not crying anymore. And I said, well, we should probably put some ice on this. The bruise is starting to form. But it doesn't hurt. I don't want to go inside. I want to keep playing. Well, it doesn't hurt right now, but it's probably going to hurt later. A different mother. Yeah, you got injured, but it doesn't hurt yet, but your brain sent, what are those things called? Endorphins. Good job remembering. And so I carried the injured child inside, gave him some chewable ibuprofen, put some ice on his knee, and then he was asking me, so what are endorphins? Let's pretend I was walking in the woods by myself. My phone had died. I sprained my ankle, and it was a really bad sprain, and my ankle's hurting a lot. Now, what am I going to do? If it hurts a lot, I'm not going to be able to walk out of the woods if I can't call someone for help. So our brain and body releases something called endorphins to kind of numb the pain. That way, if I'm out in the woods, I can get out of the woods, find a doctor, and now my foot is still going to be injured. And walking on it is going to make it worse. But at least I was able to get to safety. So then he asked, it's kind of similar to how a scab is formed. We fall, scrape our knee, the scab forms to cover it up. It's still injured, it's healing. And then he asked, well, is ice an endorphin? I said, no, but it does also numb the pain temporarily. Another time I was talking to my 10-year-old brother using a similar analogy about, I don't know why sprained ankles seem to come up so much. This time it was about coping mechanisms. 2 months ago, I sprained my ankle. I immediately put ice on it and raised up my foot. And when I got home, I put wrapped an ace bandage around it, took some ibuprofen. The next day, my foot was feeling a lot better, but it still hurt a little bit. And so, to prevent myself from constantly thinking about my foot at school and be able to instead focus on my classes, I took a bit of ibuprofen as a coping mechanism to deal with the pain. I was careful to still be gentle with my foot, and my parents drove me to school so I wouldn't have to walk on it. And by the day after that, I was almost completely fine. Now, what if I had taken the ibuprofen and then walked around as if my foot wasn't injured, or run on my foot? Well, the ibuprofen is still a coping mechanism. I'm not feeling the pain, but the pain's still there even if I can't feel it, and I'm just going to injure my foot more. Or what if I don't know how to take care of a sprained ankle? Or maybe I don't even realize my ankle is sprained. Those are not so great coping mechanisms. So coping mechanisms can be good or bad. And then we went to talk about how therapy is about learning healthy coping mechanisms for emotional pain. So this project has helped me to grow over the course of these months. And various people have asked me, have you thought about studying psychology? Have you thought about being a child psychiatrist? And at first I was like, what? But the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. I was like, give me more, give me more, give me more. And so I am going to go and study psychology. I have no idea where that will lead me. But when I started this project, I had no idea it would end up here. I had a different idea at the start. But I knew that I had an idea, and I was excited about it. And I guess that's kind of what I have for the future. The way everything is connected, our bodies, our minds, I believe in souls, it's all connected, and it's so cool and amazing to learn about how this works. It can also be really sad to learn about how it works. But one of the most important things I've learned is to be intentionally aware about myself, how I'm feeling, and then learning to acknowledge those feelings instead of ignoring them. And then to talk to people about those feelings instead of trying to keep it to myself. But also remember that I am more than just those feelings. And slowly learning more healthy ways to cope with those feelings. I was so good at ignoring.
We've got 10 minutes for questions for Bethel.
Rita?
You said you had a different idea at the beginning. What was your idea at the
Yes.
start?
So initially, I had read some articles from the website Orange Lily Project. I read some articles that my mentor had written about emotions and anxiety and trauma. And then I was on an airplane and I was flying home. I was exhausted, hadn't slept in far too long. It's hard to sleep on airplanes. And I was watching the movie Dunkirk. And of course, it's a war movie. It's very sad, and I knew how it was going to end. I knew the history, but there's still like all these people dying, and while I'm watching it, I am overanalyzing the trauma that they are going through. And I was like, you know what? I've always liked history, and I've always wanted to learn more about psychology. I need to pick a topic for my capstone in a couple weeks. Maybe something related to this. So my initial thought was to watch movies depicting trauma and war and compare their depictions of trauma. The problem with that was I decided to start by getting some basic background on trauma and PTSD, and found that was so interesting I completely abandoned the whole movie idea and just ran with it. Yes. Ray?
Is it easier to teach little kids than older kids or adults?
It depends on the individual. Sky?
Have you always been interested in psychology?
Well, I got it from my mom, kind of, so yes, I've always wanted to learn more about people and why they do the things they do. Ben?
What was your idea for like creating characters for like the brain? That was really clever.
Yes, so I had been trying to think of some clever way to explain it. So some things, like the adrenaline response, which I had explained pretty quickly, and that makes sense to explain. The parts of the brain, I was like, okay, I can give their names, but these are such long, brainy Greek words. When I first read them, I'm like, all these names is too much, I can't keep it straight. So I made like a growing Google Doc of definitions and stuff, just to help me keep it straight. And so I was trying for a while to think about, okay, how can I explain this? I don't remember exactly how it came up. I was talking to my brother, and then randomly I was like, wait. And I had a sheet of paper, and I was imagining, what if the parts of the brain were people? And then all of a sudden, I had these very vivid images of what they looked like, how they acted, all these things. And so I was like, okay, I'm writing this all down now. Shishi.
So I had a situation. So I was on the plane. And it was like really late. And when you're really tired, how does your body like know if you're like sleeping in a? This is like when you're really tired, you're sleeping in a uncomfortable position. But like when you're not tired, you're sleeping in that position. You find it more uncomfortable, but you find it comfortable like more tired because is it
What you're saying is when you're really tired, you're able to sleep in places or in positions that you normally wouldn't be able to? Oh, well, our body needs sleep, so maybe it's just like you've given up the point of caring about comfort by that point. You just need sleep. No. Sky?
Did you learn anything about like how different disorders like affect how the brain communicates?
A little bit. A lot of what I was learning was just like a brief overview. So these books I read, both really great. Dr. Daniel Siegel, he's written several books and explains things in a understandable manner. Like there are definitely words I'm like, what does this word mean? Google search, oh, okay. But overall, he explains things in a way that I could easily understand. And The Body Keeps the Score is a much heavier book. I would not recommend reading that if you're worried about, well, if you were going to read it, take it slow, take notes about how you feel. It's a heavy book. It's talking about trauma. But, sorry, remind me of your question. Oh, disorders. Yeah, so I briefly learned about some things, but not in depth. So off the top of my head, I couldn't give you any examples, but if I looked at my notes, I probably could.
Did you have to do any research on how to translate what you learned into teaching it to children, or did you use your experience with your brothers to kind of go by ear on that?
They're my guinea pigs. I kind of just, both explaining it to myself sometimes to help me remember and understand things, and explaining it to them. There were definitely times where I'd hear someone else's explanation, or like a video or something someone said, and I'm like, oh, that's a great explanation, and I would kind of take it and incorporate it into my explanations. Or other times I would kind of take something someone had and like reword it slightly to bring it down to whatever level. But yeah, I didn't do any research into how to explain things really. Yeah, Brett.
Is Kelsey Reagan your mentor?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about what field they're in and what they offered you for this project?
Yeah, so she's an American Sign Language interpreter, that's her job, and she is getting her doctorate to teach priests and church leaders how to provide care and support for people struggling with addiction, in particular self-harm. She's also writing a basically workbook for
So speaking of resources a little bit, so at that resources page, are there any that you would recommend looking at and that you particularly enjoyed?
Oh, like the author's website?
Yeah.
So for these websites here, all of them have tons of web pages on everything mental health and physical health related. I liked the Cleveland Clinic because the NIH is a bit more wordy. The Cleveland Clinic writes it in a easily understandable manner, and then if you read their page on whatever thing you're trying to learn about, then you could, if you want to learn more, go to the National Institutes of Health. And I would often read their pages for various things just to get like a summary of how it works. So when I was first learning, I would read a page about the amygdala and be like, okay, so this is the amygdala, this is what it does, this is how it relates to other things, such. Yes. Angela?
I was gonna say, if you could give a piece of advice to people who either work with small children or have children of their own on how to better communicate with them, what would you say?
Depends on the individual, obviously, and the kids, but generally, kids can understand a lot more than we think, or, I don't know, than I feel like the average person thinks. You just have to find a way to word things in a way that's goes with their interests. Like, I wouldn't, if I was talking to someone who knew nothing about books, I wouldn't, like maybe a peer, I wouldn't give an example from a book.
Yeah.
I would give an example from something they would know. So similarly with kids, if you're trying to explain something, give examples for things that they know. Maybe you don't know this individual kid, but try to give things that kids in that age range might like. Or know.
Can you add on like more time to work on this project with like some of the fields where you've been interested in?
There was a lot of side tangents that I either went on or wanted to go on more that didn't have enough time to. There's definitely like a bunch of books that I wanted to read. There's another book by Dr. Siegel that I bought but have not read yet, and I'm hoping to read this summer about childhood development, and I do want to read that. It's on my bucket list for the summer. Yeah.
And for like one more question maybe? Okay.
Angela?
Did you have a question?
No, I have a statement.
Oh, you can say.
Wow, that was just awesome. And you're so passionate, and also you're such a good talker.
Oh,
That was amazing.
Thank you.
You could just make everybody laugh, because your laugh is like so contagious.
I second that.
Okay, any other questions? If not, okay, go, Ben?